Meeting to order. We will begin with call to order, or with the adoption of the agenda and AB 361 finding, and this will be with Keith Lemieux.
Yes, the same report as before. This should be our penultimate meeting under AB 361 unless something else happens today on that topic.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll go to public comment on items on closed session. Do we have any public comment from the floor?
Do we need to make
We
a
need to
motion?
vote, a motion and a vote for agenda item 2.
Okay.
I'll make that.
So do we have a motion?
John.
Can you
Okay.
hear me?
Okay, I'll second.
And we got a second.
Chairman Heyman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters, Director Itnire, Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, moving on to item number 3, public comment on closed session. Seeing no public comment on the floor, we'll move to the phones. And seeing no public comment on the phone lines, we will now move into closed session. We're going to now move into open session. We will begin with the report on closed session with Keith Lemieux.
Good morning. The board met in closed session to discuss the items identified on the agenda, including the real property negotiation and the various identified litigations. The board received reports from the respective staff members for those items, but no reportable action took place. Mr. Chair, that concludes the report.
Thank you. Next, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'll follow with me. Face flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have a roll call.
Chairman Heyman,
Present.
Vice Chair Peters, Director Itnire, Director Griffin,
Here.
Director Vallejo.
Present.
Okay, moving on to item number 6, public comment. This time is reserved for the public to address the board about matters not on the agenda. No action will be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have any public comment from the floor? Seeing none, any public comment on the phones? No public comment. Moving on to item number 7, board member comments. Any comments from the board? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to item number 8, consent agenda. This consists of item 8A, approved minutes of the board meeting December 4th, 2022, and item 8B, approve expenditures, which includes item B1, 2, and 3. Do we have a motion to?
I'll make a motion on the consent agenda, but I think we need to hear a public comment.
Public comment, yes.
sir.
So do we have any public comment on item number 8? See no public comment from the floor, but we do have a comment from the phone. So caller, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to ask you backtrack to regular public comment. Mr. Heyman, you move a little fast with not getting enough time for the comments to get through. So may I proceed? Hello?
I'm going to ask you to repeat that. We had the volume was up pretty high, and so you were not coming in clear. So go ahead and repeat what you stated, please.
Okay. I request that I get to make general public comment. You didn't really wait very long, and I had a little small difficulty with getting the dial through.
So your public comment is on closed session or on?
No, this general public comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. This is Mike Neal, and first I want to begin, and this is just something that I think ought to be reiterated the first of every year, and just a little instruction from the California Constitution, which you all have sworn to uphold and to defend the provisions of such. The Constitution says in Section 3 that the people have the right to instruct their representatives. And the spirit of that is continued on in Section 54950 of the Brown Act. It says the people of this state not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them, which means you're supposed to be acting like we are sovereign. We have the power. You're not just a self-appointed JPA, but you draw power from us. It also says the people insist on remaining informed so they may retain control over the instruments they have created, which means that at the board, various representative people on this board, that you are instruments of the citizens. So as such, I have a request to make of the board, and this is due to the fact that there's a serious lack of getting data out to the public as far as the cost of the projected pipeline project. And all we have at present are numbers from 2019 put out by the TAC. These numbers are the capital cost for both possible projects, the O&M cost, and the annual service cost. I'm putting together a spreadsheet, which I would gladly give to anyone who wants it on the GA board. I don't want to send it to everybody and just everybody ignore it, but if you want it, you can certainly ask me to send it your way to make comment on. I'm going to make this public at some point in time. I've informed the water district of such, and at this point, I only have the 3 to 4 year old numbers, which I've had to put in cumulative inflation projections on that. It'd be much better if I had hard numbers. So I am demanding information on such of those 3 items that I just reiterated, that those numbers be updated. They be provided to me as soon as possible so that we can get this information out. It's far past time that the people in this valley know that we don't just have $20 or $30 per month of extra cost. In my estimate, they're going to have like 87 possible, or at least $50 extra cost per month per household. And this shouldn't come as a big surprise to people when it finally starts hitting their pocketbooks. They should know about this ahead of time. So I'll make a formal request for this information as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, moving back to item number 8, the consent agenda. Any public comment from the floor?
Motion to approve
Well,
consent.
I'll
I'm sorry.
I'll reaffirm that we have no other, and any public comment from the phones on item number 8. Okay, seeing none, we have a motion.
Second.
And we have a second.
There we go. Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Itnire, Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Okay, moving on to item number 9, Resolution 01-23, authorizing the general manager to execute funding agreement for the Urban Communities Drought Relief Program. This will be presented with our general manager, Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Happy New Year. So in your packet, you have a staff report, and there's also a resolution, and this is for the Urban Communities Drought Relief Program. And you may recall that last October, you did adopt a resolution to authorize staff to prepare the application and submit it. And basically, we are requesting funding under this particular program for money for the water recycling plant and for well mitigation and rehab associated with the damages to wells from declining water levels. The application itself is still being developed, still being finalized. We expect the amount of the request to be about $5.3 million or so. But what we are doing is coming back to you with another resolution, which not only allows us to submit the application, but authorizes the general manager to sign the funding agreements if our projects are selected for funding. And so the previous resolution neglected to include that provision. So we're bringing this back, requesting that you authorize the general manager to execute the funding agreements if we are given funding. And so again, that's resolution 0123 in your packet. And happy to answer questions, or I believe we have folks from Stetson also available to help us. They're preparing that application.
Yeah, I'm on the line, and so is Jeff Helsley.
Very good. Thank you, Carol. So we'll bring it back to the board for any questions or comments.
One question, Chairman Heyman. The article that we have in here mentions that the IWVGA might be eligible for a waiver based on the projects benefiting underrepresented communities. Do we know when in the grant process we would find out about that? I'm assuming that would waive our funding requirement beforehand, or would it be more of a refund type thing after we've submitted the funding? Do you know?
Director, go ahead, Carol.
No, I was going to say that's a great question, Steve. So I'm hoping that you or one of your staff have the answer.
Well, Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, when this provision has been in a funding agreement, we make application after awarded the grant, and make an application for a forgiveness of any matching fund requirement. That's how it's normally done. Is that right, Jeff?
No, the grant application itself will submit information on our eligibility for that waiver so that the DWR staff can evaluate it when they're evaluating our application. So I believe in the past when they've given us a notice that they want to award this, they also at the same time let us know whether we qualify for the waiver or not.
Jeff, could you hang on just 1 second? We're having an audio issue.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I think we got that cleared up. Thank you. Could you repeat that last bit of what you were saying?
Yep. The application itself will provide information on our potential eligibility for the waiver so that DWR staff, when they review the application, they can at the same time review whether we're eligible and make a determination whether we're eligible for the waiver. So when we hear about whether or not we get the grant awarded, we should also hear whether we qualified for the waiver or not.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to public comment from the floor.
Yes, this is Wes Kassenstein, Policy Advisory Committee member and a domestic well owner. And I was taking a minute as I was reading through today's packet, and I took a minute to go to the link provided where we could see the objectives of this state project. And I was looking through the bullets, and in section 5 that kind of stated the objectives. And the last bullet on the whole thing, I'll read it to you. It says, fish and wildlife rescue, protection, and relocation. So I thought there might be an opportunity there for us to relocate Tui Chub? The fact that the state would even entertain something like that, it's kind of interesting. So it just occurred to me that might be something we might consider also including in our proposal. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Wes.
We'll have a look at that, Wes. Understanding that the Tui Chub and relocation is pretty much under the control of the Navy, but we'll have a look at that.
Any other public comment from the floor? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the phone lines. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Mike Neal. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I want to make a comment about the disposition of the water that will be coming from the water recycling plant. This never been subject matter directly talked about, being discussed about this. So all I can do is try to insert it when we're talking about funding opportunities this water and this water recycling plant is almost entirely outside what the Navy will be sending to the treatment plant. This all entirely is water district customers' water. They paid to pump the water out of the ground, get it to their homes. They've also are paying for, will pay for, the sewer treatment plant and the water recycling plant. The water that comes out of that plant needs to be credited to the allocation for the water district and the water district customers. And I foresee what's going to be planned is that the city is going to claim it's their water and they want to sell it back to the people who already purchased it, who already paid for the plant, who are paying for the staff salary, paid for everything. It's our water, and we want that water put into the allocation that's going to the water district, so that we don't have to pay GA fees to import water or huge $2,000 per acre foot fees to the city to profit off of to sell us back the water we've already paid for and are paying them to process. That's my comment on that. Thank you.
Any other public comment on the phones? Okay, seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board for any further questions or comments or a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 01-23.
I'll second, but my mic won't come with.
They're really finicky.
There it goes. Okay, second.
Chairman Hayman,
Aye.
Vice Chair Peters,
Aye.
Director Itnire, Director Griffin,
Aye.
Director Vallejo.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, we're moving on to item number 10, Water Resources Manager Report with Steve Johnson.
I got to unmute. Thank you, Chairman Hayman. For everybody's information, staff has worked together, staff and legal counsel worked together to try and streamline these board meetings a little bit. We realize, a lot of people, I guess, realize that the Water Resource Manager Report becomes the bulk, and there's a lot of things that are repetitious. What we're trying to do for this meeting is to consolidate it down to having an oral report that basically just covers what is currently active. And Jean Moran will provide that. There are PowerPoints for that portion. The rest of our Water Resource Manager Report, which follows the outline, which is in your packet, and there also is what we call a staff report, sort of Water Resource Manager staff report, which actually includes the information that you normally see on a PowerPoint. The items that are covered include the grant funding update, which is Prop 1, Prop 68, and the closeout of Prop 1 and Prop 68 is all included in your packet. Implementation of Round 1 grant and the request for funding. This is on the pipeline project is there, and invoice number 2 information is there. In the packet, we've also included information on the most recent grant applications submitted. That's Round 2 for around $5 million. That is included in the report and in the packet report. There's information on current projects, including the Recycle Water Program, and when we're going to be providing information as to the project report coming out of the technical committee, which is a combination of technical reports from the Water District and the city and the Groundwater Authority. We're also providing information on the status of the Bureau of Reclamation feasibility study. That is in the packet. We are preparing that feasibility study in order to qualify for federal funds for the project. So that is being done, and it's covered in the report. Status of the import water project that we're working on with Provost and Pritchard on the alignments and also on the RFPs is all included in this staff report, so you can refer to it along with next steps. An update on the shallow well mitigation program is included. And there's also an inclusion on the schedule for completion and submittal of the annual report. So that's all in the packet for you to review. We'd be happy to answer any board questions or other public questions. I think we have the ability to pull it up if it's needed. This little staff report can be pulled up if we need it. And with that, I would like to go to Jean's report, Jean Moran's report, which is on current activities that she is working on And that'll conclude our report, and we'll be open for questions.
Good morning, members of the board and the public. My update will be on the data collection and monitoring update. So the groundwater levels have been posted on the SGMA site and also the DMS website. These are the bulleted items that are part of your packet, the end part of your packet. And then I will have 2 slides after this. In addition, the Navy real estate agreement is almost complete. This is for installing telemetry equipment at 5 key wells on the Navy base. We are expecting that to be completed this month. In addition, we are working with the Bureau of Reclamation Region 8 regarding
I think we lost Gene.
of managing. We roughly have 160 monitoring wells in the monitoring program, and it is cleaning
Gene?
up access agreements.
Gene, I'm
with
going
this
to interrupt.
program.
Gene, I'm going
Yeah?
to interrupt you here for just a second. We lost our line for a brief moment there, so could you kind of back up and kind of start over?
Okay. Okay, I will. So the first part, I have 3 portions. The first one is with data collection and monitoring update, and that's part of the bulleted text in your packet. And then I will be reviewing 2 slides that will come right after that. The 3 pieces on the data collection and monitoring update, one is the groundwater level measurements and the water quality sampling that took place this fall in October. The data for the groundwater level measurements has been posted before the deadline with SGMA. We posted it in mid-December, and the deadline was the end of December with DWR. And then we also posted it on the data management system, which is open to the public, that the GA board and the GSP it was set up during the GSP process. There will be a field summary being sent out to the TAC by the end of January of that data for them to review. The other piece on data collection is the access agreements with Navy Real Estate out of the San Diego office, and that should be completed by the end of January so that we can put telemetry equipment in 5 key wells on the Navy base. And then the third item that we're working on in the data collection and monitoring update is the USBR Region 8, coordinating with them on 6 wells that were drilled in the 1990s. And we will probably be meeting them in February in the field at those wells. And it's working with BLM and getting access agreements to them and taking over those access agreements that used to be with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. The next slide. Sorry, I've got to sort of play on my screen also, is about an update on the configuration management plan. This is regarding the, it would be 1 slide back. There you go. Thank you. We had a conference call, the Water Resource Manager and DRI, on December 5th to discuss configuration items and model revisions. And then on the 15th, a Teams meeting with the technical modeling group to review those configuration items and the recommendations for revisions to the model update. The CMP timeline in 2023 is pretty rigorous because we want to have a functioning, calibrated model and future baseline model run completed by the end of the year so that in early 2024, we'll be doing modeling scenarios for the 5-year GSP update. So I put the timeline of and the tasks that we're planning on completing in 2023 on the left-hand side of this slide. What's on the right-hand side is one of the configuration items, and this is how evaporation takes place on a wet playa. So part of this whole process is there's a series of configuration items. It's data that gets reviewed by this technical group, and we work through the technical item and determine if it should be incorporated into the model. So this was one of the configuration items, and I put it on the slide just so it would be understood that this is all technical review for this task. The next slide, please. This is my final slide. It's regarding the subflow from Rose Valley into Indian Wells Valley. So the last board meeting, the GA board approved the cooperative agreement. We are still waiting for the Navy's verification of accounting and appropriations data. So there were just a series of X's. It still is going through the Navy's part on this. Once we get those few X's filled in, that will allow us to be able to invoice for the cooperative agreement. Then it will be signed. And once that's signed, we will start the kickoff meetings in the field and set up the actual drilling of the wells. In addition, the Groundwater Authority has signed the lease agreement with the California State Lands Commission in November. They asked for one more piece of data of information. We did give that to them, and they are ready to sign that agreement. So with both with Carol's signature as well as the California State Lands Commission signature, we should be getting that also, I would guess, just in the next couple of weeks, given the recent emails we've had on it. Once that is in place, we'll be able to evaluate those existing former sawmill wells and start monitoring groundwater levels in those wells. We will be completing the drilling subcontract once the agreement is signed, and then we are expecting to start drilling in late February 2023. And that's the end of my slides. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.
So just we're open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'll bring back to the board for any questions or comments for either Steve or Gene.
I have a question for Steve, going back to his report on the shallow well mitigation program. Reading through this, I had a couple concerns. The Heritage Village, where is that at right now currently? I see that the report was done and the report was brought back.
Steve, I believe you might be muted.
Yep, I'm sorry. I was talking away and I thought it was muted. That's all. But I was talking. Anyway, yes, we did get the outside report, the evaluation of the cause of failure to the well. We have prepared a staff report. It is going to the GA staff, including legal counsel, this week for concurrence with our recommendations. And then it will be going to the applicant. And then once the applicant and the staff are on the same page with the evaluation and the recommendation, it'll come back to the board. We expect it to be in front of the board at your February meeting.
Okay. And I guess my big concern was, Steve, why are we considering this well if it's an irrigation well and it's for a business, not an entity? Or, I mean, a sole person. I have a concern with that, so.
Yes, we've discussed that internally with the GA staff and looked at, It just actually came up this morning. We're going to go back and look and see what the resolution and what the policy is regarding domestic wells and the definition of a domestic well.
Steve, let me jump in for a second.
Okay.
So the notion of what falls under you're talking about what falls under the exclusion for the replenishment fee. And that relates to divining the intent of the Navy. The notion here is that uses that are intended to support the base fall under that exclusion. That those uses are not strictly, so the most obvious use is the personnel and housing the personnel. So that's where the notion of domestic use comes up, but it's not applied strictly to exclusively literally water being served to humans. It also includes sort of the other niceties of residential use, such as parks and surrounding landscaping. My understanding is that this particular well fits that definition. It's used for the common areas of the residential area. So we'll look at the issue, but broadly speaking, it does seem to me to fit the definition.
Okay. And then also, I have a concern with being dry. Have we looked at the wells that are in the area, in the vicinity? I know the county has one that's a mile or so away at the park, so I would hope all that's taken into account too. And I have no other questions.
Yes, that's included in the staff report. There are some issues with the well, sanding and other issues. There's also pretty clear evidence of a significant drop in the static groundwater elevation in the area. That is all included. It will all be considered in the staff report and the recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
I do have a question for Gene. Gene, you mentioned needing an access agreement. You mentioned the Bureau of Land Management. Have you been in contact with my office regarding what you need?
Yes, we're working with Paul Rodriguez.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you can always call me if you need to.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's very much appreciated.
Okay, we'll now move to public comment from the floor.
Judy Decker, Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District. I don't know if this is really the appropriate place to ask it, but I believe Steve is the person to ask. At our board meeting yesterday, one of our directors had some questions about the press release and the Army Corps of Engineers that was mentioned in that press release, and wanted to have further explanation as to the role of the Army Corps of Engineers in this. I think it's a grant that the GA received. And so I hope you can answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. I'll give you I'm not the expert on this. In fact, I think Phil Hall is on, and maybe even Capitol Corps folks are on. But what the Corps of Engineers is brought on to do, and this is to help support federal funding for the project as a whole, including capital costs going forward. The Corps of Engineers, as part of the legislation going forward that would enable us to get funding from the federal government, will be doing what we're calling a verification evaluation, a verification report on the project. We're working with the Corps on a list of potential work tasks, topics that they may be involved in going forward. But this is all tied to working with Capitol Corps and trying to to apply for and get federal funding for this project. And there's other people that are working on this that may have more detail than I do.
Steve, this is Michael McKinney. I am here. Judy, I can explain that to you. In the Water Resources Development Act, we were able to secure language which had the Corps do some studies for us with regard to the planning activities associated with both sustainability projects. That is the interconnection project and the water recycling plant. There is a secondary thing going on right now, which is we will be applying for what they call the Planning Assistance to States program, and we'll be bringing that to the board in February with a letter of interest to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, having them become more involved and do greater activities with regard to planning on both of those projects, getting them ready for construction. Stetson had identified $5.3 million in planning activities required for the water recycling plant, and between $8 and $11 million in planning activities required for the interconnection project. We have secured $7.6 million of that through Sigma, and then we have secured some additional funding through this language in the WRDA bill this year. And then we'll secure some additional funding under the Planning Assistance to States, which will hopefully bring the interconnection project to full planning, and we'll be able to then move into construction. And for everybody's edification, planning, according to the federal government, is everything through the environmental process, through NEPA, CEQA, land right-of-way, and a specific level of design and engineering. Does that answer your question?
I'm busily taking notes. Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Michael.
If you need anything, give me a call directly, and I can help you out with it.
Thank you. And I can't say enough how much I appreciate as an individual Capitol Corps' work for our valley.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other public comment from the floor? Okay, we'll move to the phone lines. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. This is Neil again. First, I want to comment on two sections of this report. First is the recycled water analysis. I find it extremely disappointing that we had to spend quite a sum of money coming to the same exact decision, which was generated by the water district, last year. Paid for, of course, by water district customers, just like we're paying for everything that the GA does. The water district is the sole source of funding for the GA. And doing repetitive analyses and with doubling the cost is always highly disappointing to the citizens who are the ones having to pay the bill. So I'd just like to comment that's on that in that fashion. The other one about the shallow well mitigation of the Heritage Village, the one that irrigates only the park landscaping out there, Heritage Village. I completely disagree with the opinion that was stated about somehow this benefits the Navy. If you've ever been out there, or the ones of you who visited or live out there, you're well aware that is not a public park. That park, that area is cordoned off by no trespassing signs, telling people if you come around here and get on this grass or on these grounds and you're not a resident, we're gonna kick you out by force if necessary. That disqualifies that under the thinking that this somehow vaguely benefits the Navy by somehow bringing some kind of recreation to it. Only citizens when it only bring benefit to people that live in that housing area. So I think that disqualifies it, and I strongly object to the fact that they're trying to get a pass on this and get money to redo their well. I don't think that should be allowed. The city's already doing that, and they get a free pass on their water use, so they don't have to pay any fees. So if it's not a public use park, then it shouldn't apply for this. Should not apply. They should not get the funding. All right. Thank you.
Any other public comment from the phones? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring back to the board. Anyone have any other final questions or comments? Okay. Moving on to item number 11, the general manager's report with Carol.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you have in your packet our monthly financial report and pretty much the year-end financials. If you look at the cash balance report at the end of the financials, you will see that we were not able to get the December receipts and disbursements in time to update that for December, but all of that is just because of the holidays and all of that being slow to be received and people being unavailable. But we will have all of that reconciled in the that we give you next month. Also in the packet is the Capital Core Group report, and I think we just got a really good update from Michael McKinney on one of the key points in the memo, and that is the fact that the WRDA, the Water Resources Development Act, was just reauthorized, signed into law by the president, and we do have that directive language in there allowing the Army Corps of Engineers to assist us with validating our study and providing some assistance. And I think we will be looking at bringing you a draft letter of intent requesting their assistance here in the near future. There's some other items in that report, and I'll let you peruse that at your leisure. If you have any particular questions, though, about those activities, by all means, please let me know. Or I know we still have Michael on the line. And last item for my report is just to let you know that we have a request from Inyo County to basically approve a well permit for a residential well. And you'll recall that last year with the governor's executive order, GSAs were required to review applications for new wells. I think that was primarily for agricultural wells, but essentially the GSAs were asked to just kind of look at whether the new proposed wells were consistent with the existing groundwater sustainability plans. And so we have a form that Kern County provided for us, and we're using that form. And so Inyo County also asked us to take a look at an application. This happens to be for a residential well. But they are using essentially the same type of form that Kern County developed, and we're going to be reviewing that and just providing that form back to them. If you have any questions, we will be happy to ask. But we view this as just basically a ministerial staff function, ensuring that whatever's proposed is consistent with what's in our GSP. And so with that, I believe that's my report.
Very good. Thank you, Carol. So I'll bring you back to the board for any questions or comments for Carol on item number 11, General Manager's Report.
I've got one.
Go ahead.
Carol, with the audit, have we heard back from Brown Armstrong? Are they going to come and talk about what they're trying to justify this price increase, or are they going to get us the audit?
Yeah, staff tried to set up a meeting with them in December following our last meeting. And because of the holidays and their schedule, we weren't able to get that meeting set up. And now, in light of some new information as well regarding some of our litigation, we have some new information to provide for them. So we are working still to set up that meeting and maybe bring them up to date on some of the new proceedings and new information regarding our pending litigation. And we very much hope to have them back at the February meeting.
Okay, yeah, if we could get them here, I would appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. We've not forgotten about it. We just weren't able to get in touch with them to discuss this and have them appear for January. I think the holidays were just took up too much time and put everybody behind in trying to get back up to speed.
Understood, thanks. That's it for me.
Very good. Director Griffin?
Mine was related and answered, so I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, very good. This is Scott Amon. So I have a question, Carol, for you on the well permit approval for the residential well in Inyo County. Do we
Yes,
have a rough timeline of how long that process will take?
We don't believe that it's going to take any particular time. I think we can approve it and send it back at any time. We really just wanted to bring it to the board's attention just to make sure you were aware of it before we sent in our response.
Okay, and if I'm correct, this is our first well approval, is that right?
That may be the case. I thought we might have had one for Kern County early on, but I don't recall. This is definitely first for Inyo.
Okay. Okay. Very
Chairman,
good.
if I may, this is Phil Hall. I could probably add some texture to this question. So what we had is an executive order adopted by the governor at the end of March to have counties not approve wells under some specific conditions unless some findings could be made. There were 4 findings, 2 of which were specifically for a GSA to make, 2 of which really could not be made by a county, had to be made by a GSA. And all of the counties in the state have been putting together forms and handling it in various ways to deal with this approval process. This particular well is not subject to the governor's order because it's for residential use. Inyo is asking us to check the boxes, which we'll be happy to do at a staff level, but we don't need to because this is a residential well. And if we can remember back, I think it was 4 months ago from the discussion, the point that I made at that time was this is a ministerial act for our GSA because our GSA says you can put as many wells as you want, wherever you want, and pump whatever you want, essentially, as long as you pay the fees appropriate for that pumping. So this is very much a just check the box, and this residential well for somebody's house can be drilled in short order.
Very good. Thank you, Phil. And that was my understanding when we had discussed it previously, that the residential wells would just follow the protocol back to the county. And would this still follow that basis, but through Inyo County, so that we're just...
Yes, we're basically just checking the boxes on the form and sending it back to the county.
Yeah.
So it'll be part of their approval packet.
Very good. That's all I had.
I do have a question. It may actually be a question for Steve Johnson, but perhaps Carol knows the answer. The question is, so last month we got a presentation from Provost and Pritchard identifying the preferred alignment for a new pipeline. Does that complete the contract requirements for Provost and Pritchard at this time? Is there more to go?
Want me to answer, Carol?
Yep. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Okay. Essentially, under the task list that we have with Provost and Pritchard, that was the main thrust of their commitment, of their work assignment. It was pretty general work assignment, and it includes a lot of things associated with the pipeline alignment. Provost and Pritchard has completed the work done so far to get us to a point where we selected the alignment. As part of the agreement with Provost and Pritchard, there is a provision that, but let me back up. They've completed their work with a fair amount of funding left in their budget, primarily because, and I hope they may be on the line, but I'm going to say it anyway, mainly because we made it work so fast. They couldn't spend the money that fast. So we have budget left on what was under their contract. a provision of our the GA's agreement with Provost and Pritchard allows the water resource manager to extend the time on that contract for them to continue some work. We are working on extending the time on that contract, the termination date. We can extend it up to 90 days. We're looking at extended, I think right now we're looking at maybe a 45 days to have them continue work on some items, including work that they were already doing but couldn't complete on the alignment issues associated with power supply, associated with locations of pump stations, associated with permitting. Some of the things that they didn't quite get completed on, we have funding left, and we're looking at extending their timeline to continue working on that under the existing budget. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the board? We'll move to public comment from the floor. Seeing no public comment from the floor, we'll move to the phone lines. Caller, go ahead.
Yes.
Caller, go ahead.
Hello, this is Renee Westerlusk, and I have one.
Go ahead, Renee.
I'm commenting on actually a comment that was made in the last section, but I didn't call in quick enough. The value to Heritage Village, to the Navy, is large. In order to attract the caliber of people needed to do the research, we need to have amenities, community amenities, and there's quite a few people that work on the base that live in Heritage Village. So that benefits the Navy in recruiting. And then I have a second comment. I just wanted to know if through Capital Corps, they were keeping tabs months ago on a bill that was supposed to provide repurposing of farmland that had to be followed. I was wondering what happened to that, and would our area be eligible for any of that funding if it did, in fact, get passed? Thank you.
Good morning. This is Jeff Simonetti with the Capital Corps Group. So there are two components to the land fallowing program. The land fallowing program from last year is still available, so for the 2022 year. And I believe the GA is looking into potential eligibility on that. There's a $40 million fund available for that program. And in terms of the 2023 budget, we just received the top lines yesterday pertaining to that on the California state budget. There wasn't specifics pertaining to the land fallowing program in there, but just as a general assumption for this year, there's an estimated potential $29.5 billion budget deficit this year. So a lot of the programs that were available from last year pertaining to those are likely going to be a lot smaller than they were this year. So that's something to keep in mind as we think about moving into the next year.
Thank you, Jeff. Did that answer your question, Renee? I believe we may have lost Renee. Okay, we'll move on to the next caller. Go ahead. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, this is Larry Mead. I'm a ratepayer in the Water District's area. I just like to just say that are you there?
Yes, go ahead, Larry.
Okay. I'm very concerned about the replacement well thing. I think that your agency or your group needs to be very, very careful with this. Inyo County, there's a well up there that was a replacement, supposedly well, that when the freeway widened, the guy just stuck a piece of casing in the ground and he moved the house. Okay. There's abandoned wells that haven't been used in years and years. And, we need to be able to, you need to give the trust from you to the public that these wells have been cameraed, you know what's wrong with them, and you relay that information to the public. And also the Heritage Village issue, my wife and I paid fees in there on 2 homes for years, and these fees were to belong to the HOA that's supposed to take care of the well and landscaping. I don't think this money was intended under the past leadership of the GA to be used for entities that collect fees, and especially collect fees for landscaping, and then you're going to give them money to drill a well. I mean, I could go on. I could go on about this for hours, and I won't. But it's just not right unless you guys get somebody out there, do your diligence, and treat the public fairly on this GA. I'll let you go. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Larry. Any other public comment from the phones? Okay, seeing none, any further comments or questions from the board? Okay, we'll now move on to item number 12, the PAC update, and that will be with Dave Janis.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. As you know, we did not have a PAC meeting in December as we decided to devote our time to Christmas Eve rather than, and Santa rather than the GA, unfortunately. We did, from my report last time, you'll remember that we had Lisa Butler from Stantec and the DWR facilitation present their draft findings regarding communications and engagement with respect to our new proposal for communication engagement and the communication and engagement plan, the formal plan that we have reported out onto you. Our tasking for the meeting this month, in 2 weeks from today, or from Thursday, was to review those and provide individual written comments, review what Stantec presented, both with regards to the findings of their current study, as well as what they had introduced as conditions for collaboration out of the Public Policy Institute at Sacramento in assessing moving forward. And we were going to look at those individually, provide comments into the chair that are going to be distributed this weekend to all the players, to all the PAC members, who will then consider them at our meeting in 2 weeks. But they also were using that meeting as a survey of the PAC members for their study, and they asked us to go online as individual members and input to that. In addition, they had mentioned that their readings of our recommendations had further stimulated them to do a social demographic study that would be in their final report. So there are 2 items pending for us to consider in total, their overall study findings, the social demographics report that they were going to fully flesh out and present in their final presentation and report, as well as the final report itself. So the question is, and I had talked to Director Griffin before the meeting, that has not yet been provided to the Water District, and I know they were going to provide it to the GA also, and they mentioned that. So if at any time we get those between now and that meeting, we'll forward them to all members of the PAC to have for additional consideration. But we'll still take up the meat of what we have from them and a lot of the discussion and interaction we had with them and the public, and take that into account, whether there are things we should change in our recommendations for the C&E in general, and then specifically for the C&E plan. So that's what's on our plate for this month, and I would ask that any inputs that are received in the final report, which they said they were going to ask for an extension for because it had timed out, I think, at the end of the year, if they come into the Water District or the GA, that we get them forwarded.
And we will do that.
Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Dave. Any comments from the board? Okay, hearing none. Any comments or public comment from the floor? Seeing none, any public comment from the phones? We have none, so thank you, Dave. And that concludes our meeting. So our next meeting will be February 8th, 2023. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.